We're here in part two of a video I'm doing, which responds to one YouTuber's question. He's a former Catholic turned atheist, and his question is, how can you be joyful in heaven when your loved ones are in hell? Now, I've talked about in part one, if you haven't seen it, you can see the link right next to us. I've talked in part one about the mercy of God. Now it's time to talk in part two about the other side. And I said we would get to those who reject God's mercy. One of the problems that I've seen in dealing with atheists is they have no concept of evil. They can, like, they're bad people, their people shouldn't do what they should. Turn around and you say there is no spirituality and there is no God, and in fact there is, then okay, that gives you a blind spot. But if some of those forces seek your total destruction, and they are spiritual forces, now you have an even bigger blind spot and a more dangerous one. And this is the issue with atheists. They don't understand evil. I think one of the reasons is because many of the people who are proclaiming atheists come from what appears to be upper middle class or upper middle class backgrounds, and so they haven't been to environments where you can actually see evil at its worst. They don't understand that there is a reality of evil that is scary for those who don't get it. For those who do get it, we kind of like, well, you know, we are in God's power, therefore we don't fear evil, but we respect those boundaries. When we're talking about people who reject God, they're turning around saying, I want nothing to do with God. Similar to what you see in the Blasphemy Challenge. I want to reject God. I want nothing to do. I want God completely out of my life. I don't want God at all. And when you see people doing that, and you see some people who carry that out and live that, then what happens is you also see things happening to them. They tend to become very self-centered. They tend to be very narcissistic, and it may be part of their personalities, and they also become very dangerous. We take Thomas Aquinas' understanding that things in this world are analogous to the next. How can you have any happiness in this world if your son or daughter is a serial killer? Because when we're talking about people who end up in hell, we're not talking about people who chew bubblegum in church. We're talking about people who've made some very serious decisions and put themselves outside the realm of God. If you want to see a great depiction of evil, and you want to see a great depiction of what hell can, I guess, be, go rent the movie Event Horizon. Event Horizon is a science fiction story, excellent story. It's actually very well put together, too, as science. Science fiction story that brings out a simple dramatization of St. Augustine's doctrine on evil. And you will see the reality of evil. So go check it out, and you will see what you're dealing with when you're dealing with evil. And now you need to understand it within the context of people. Because there are people out there who are evil. People who seek not so much your destruction, they seek their own self-exaltation. And if it takes your destruction to do it, they'll do it. Maybe one of the best examples I can give of this happens to be in the book and the movie, Something Wicked This Way Comes. Now, it's a fiction story, but Ray Bradbury, the author, captured very well this Mr. Dark. And this Mr. Dark was the main character, one of the main characters. He is the antagonist. And he basically will promise anything you want. And what he doesn't tell you is that he takes something in the process. And if you see in the movie what happens, for example, is he promises this old teacher that she can be young again. But what he doesn't tell her, and she discovers too late, is that when she becomes young and she sees herself being young, she goes blind. And so she loses something just as precious. There are real Mr. Darks. They're pretty scary people. And what they will do is that it isn't so much that they will have these magic powers to take something from you. What they will do is they will promise you something. They will give you what they promise you, and then they will own you. And usually what they give you is something that puts you in a position that if people found out about it, that your life would be destroyed. So then they own you. And these people destroy whole organizations. They destroy whole companies. They're pretty dangerous people. And the problem is, the warning sign is there. The warning sign, when you see that this guy is promising you something that's going to lead you down a path, and you turn around and say, well, I'm liberated now, I don't have to do this, I can do anything I want. You're walking down a path that could be led by a Mr. Dark. And if you end up in that path, he's got you and he owns you. There is a Mr. Dark in prison right now. I've dealt with one of his victims, and I've spoken to him, and I've to comfort him, I've let him know, please understand that this man is in the best place that he will be for all eternity. What that means is he's in a bad place. He's in prison. But if things are bad now, once he dies, things get a lot worse. And you have to understand, these Mr. Darks or Mrs. Darks or Ms. Darks, these aren't people who, again, will have people chewing gum in church. These are people who have no problem with destroying lives to glorify themselves. Usually they're severely narcissistic. So they're their own gods. And you worship them after you end up in their web. Maybe one of the best examples of this can be seen in Diane Sawyer's interview of Charles Manson, another Mr. Dark and a classic example of one. If these people become known, they become known on notorious levels. So you take this Charles Manson, and you look at his situation. And Diane Sawyer asked him why he did what he did. He destroyed people's lives. He led them down that path. He opened up that door so that they could walk down this path, telling them that they're liberated now and they could be with him. And many of these people saw him as a Christ figure. He gave them drugs during the whole bit. And now here, many years later, she asked him, Diane Sawyer asked him why he did this. And it wasn't well, I'm sorry I did this. I apologize. I realized maybe I was high at the time. No. He looked right at her and said, I'm a criminal woman. That's what I do. There you go. When you're talking people who end up in hell, who have turned around and says, I want nothing to do with God, get God out of my life, I am my own God, I will destroy who I want, I will lift up who I want, I, you find yourself dealing with some pretty scary characters. The case I'm about to tell you is one of the scariest. And it's one of the reasons why I have the disclaimer at the very beginning. There was a young girl, she was 18, actually she's a woman, was part of a gang. She had mentioned to one person that she was interested in leaving the gang. A week later, she was gang raped, beaten, and set on fire. And when they set her on fire, they did it in such a way that they burnt her face off. How can you be joyful in heaven when your loved ones are in hell? If your loved ones are intensely evil people, not only will you be joyful in heaven, so will everyone else. God bless you.